Hello, my name's Eleanor
And I'm Laura.
and we're here today with Evelina London Community Speech and Language Therapy Service working with the Mainstream Schools team, and welcome to our School Talk video.
Today we're going to have a think about understanding different people's perspectives, and we're going to use a visual planner to try and help talk through the feelings and the thoughts which we might encounter in different situations. Today's session is mainly for those young people who are about in Key Stage 3 or 4, but you might be able to use these ideas for some younger or older children too. Today, if you can get hold of a piece of scrap paper for later, and also a few coloured pens, that'll be really great. So go and find those and we'll tell you when to get those ready. Also, just to say that obviously Ellen and I are going to be socially distancing, so if one of us pops out of shot, we are still there, we'll be back soon. But yes, that just means the other person will be taking over the talking. So, what are we going to do today? This is our visual timetable. So first of all, I'm going to share a tip of the week with us. Next, we're going to talk through a situation, which is something you might find happens at school or something similar to this. Then we're going to use a visual planner to talk through that situation and to identify the thoughts and the feelings of those people involved. And that will help us just to understand a bit and to help us to know what we can do next time for a better outcome. After that, we're going to think through our feelings using something called zones of regulation. And then we'll do some final thoughts and we'll say goodbye for today. So the tip of the week this week is to use a visual planner to support your young person to talk about a difficult situation which might have made them feel a little bit angry or upset. So we're going to introduce the terms expected and unexpected behaviour, which might include talking over the teacher in the classroom, swearing, hitting pupils, running away or hiding, or doing something else like talking or being on your phone when you should be listening. Oh, sorry, Eleanor.
Like Laura has modelled here. So the school day can often be really busy and full of lots of different interactions with both peers and adults. And sometimes situations happen which can upset, anger or confuse young people. This confusion in combination with difficulties around understanding or using language and our communication skills can make trying to explain what has happened or how they feel really difficult for young people. This can also lead to unexpected behaviours, which in turn can make the situation a little bit more stressful for everyone who's involved. So what we're going to be talking about today is how using visuals and a visual planner can help guide our young people in order to explain what has happened and to process their feelings.
Great, so we're nearly ready to start our session all together. But before I do that, let me share with you the tip of the week. So our tip of this week is to use a visual planner to help us to find out what other people are thinking and feeling, and also to process our own thoughts and feelings. So grab your pieces of scrap paper and your pens. If you can all come into the same room and get ready to watch, I'm just going to tick our tip off our visual timetable because that one's finished. And what we're going to do now is to talk through our situation and see what we're going to learn. So the first thing to remember is that if a situation has happened which is stressful, which has made us sad, which has made us really angry, sometimes the worst thing we can do is to try and talk about it straight away. Sometimes that makes just things even worse and it makes someone even more cross or even more angry. So sometimes the first question to ask is, should we talk about this now? Or should we leave it for a bit and should we talk about it a bit later? And that's something which you can talk about with the young people in your household and just see what do they prefer. It might also depend on what different situations are occurring, but that's the first really key thing to keep in our minds. So once we're ready to talk, there are some helpful things that we can do to try and process a situation so that we can learn from it and understand what we're thinking and feeling. So to do this today, we're going to talk through a situation which might happen at school. It's got two 15-year-old boys in, one's called Brad and one's called James, and they are getting ready for their mock exams for their GCSEs. So let's see what happens with Brad and James.
Okay. So I'm going to read the story about Brad and James. It was a week before Brad's exams, and he was trying to do some revision in the library. His friend, James, was sitting at the next table. James could be a little irritating at times. He never worked, and he always did well at exams, whereas Brad had to work hard just to pass. James was reading a magazine and listening to his music. Brad was finding it hard to concentrate as he was thinking about how unfair it was that James could sit and read his music magazine and he could also hear James's music. He became angry. Surely James would know that his music would be bothering him. Surely James realised how important it was that Brad revised and passed his exam. And he must know that it was very unfair to sit and relax while Brad had to work. Suddenly, he couldn't bear it any longer. He went up to James and screamed at him to turn down his music. James was really startled and upset at Brad and refused. Brad was furious and stormed out of the library. Later, when Brad and James talked about it with the librarian, it became apparent that James had no idea that his music was bothering Brad. He had only gone into the library to be with Brad, and he had assumed that Brad would tell him if it was too loud. In fact, the librarian had also not noticed the music and so thought the volume was fine. Okay, so, oh dear, poor Brad. I think he's gotten a little bit stressed there.
I think you're right. What gave you that clue though?
Well, I think if we can see from his unexpected behaviours.
Just remind me, Eleanor, what do we mean again by unexpected behaviours?
Well, that's a good question. An unexpected behaviour is something which happens in a situation which shows how someone is feeling, but it can be surprising for others that are around in that situation, and it can make other people feel a little bit sad or fearful or cross.
Yeah, that's right. So in our story, the unexpected behaviour is that Brad is feeling really angry, but rather than using his words to express that, he just yells and shouts at James, and then he gets furious and he storms out of the library.
Yeah, exactly. So James didn't know that Brad was so angry, and it took him by surprise, and that's why we call it an unexpected behaviour.
So sometimes these things happen and we don't really understand what people are thinking and feeling at the time. So that's why it's important to try and work out the thoughts and feelings so that we understand, and then if it happens similarly again, we kind of have a bit more understanding about what people are thinking and feeling.
Yeah, definitely. So what we're going to be talking about is using a visual planner. So we can explore this story a little bit further. So this might be the time that you might want to get your blank piece of paper and a pen and draw through with us. And it's something that you can use as a tool going forward to talk to the young people in your family about events that may happen to them, which are a little bit tricky to explain, lots of emotions. So our talking through situation is finished, and now we're going to use a visual planner to talk about it. Oops. There we go.
Just to say while Ellen's putting this up, we've put a photo of this on the website so that you can see it slightly more clearly, and we're also going to put up another blank copy like this so that you've got that for reference. But for now, it's great if you've got your piece of scrap paper and your pens, and you can draw along with us as we talk through this, and then you can help to see what happens and then have it as a template to use next time in your own situations. So the first step is to think about the setting. So we're going to think about who was in our situation. Okay, who was in our situation, and also when and where the situation took place. That's really important because that really sets the scene for what's happening. So in our story, the situation involved Brad and James, and the event happened in the library. So that is our first box. So if you draw a box on your paper, that's it, just nicely with a coloured pen, doesn't have to be anything beautiful, that can go in there. Lovely. So we then need to think about what happened first. Here we go, here's our what, a nice question mark, lovely. So what happened first? Can you remember? So in our situation, Brad was finding it hard to concentrate because he was thinking how unfair it was that James did not need to revise as much as him. Lovely, so draw your next box, and that is your what box. That's it, and then you've got an arrow over to the next bit. So before we go to the main event, we can think about what Brad was feeling with what happened. So we know that Brad was feeling frustrated that he was finding it harder to study than James. He was really annoyed that James could sit back and read his magazine and not study as hard, and he was jealous of James because James just found it easier to study and Brad had to put in a lot more effort. So that's what Brad was feeling. At this stage, we don't really have any information about how James was feeling. We probably think James was feeling okay because he was just having a good time reading his magazine. But we'll find out more about how James feels as we go along. So the main event. So draw another box. You can put main event up there as well. So what happened in our situation? Brad became angry because he could hear James's music playing, and this impacted even more on his ability to concentrate on his work. So when you're drawing this out, that box is for describing the situation. Just really succinctly, just describe it in a few sentences. Think about what happened. So after that, what happened next? So basically, Brad was feeling furious at this point. Here we go. Here's the how were they feeling. So this time we know what Brad's feeling, and this time we also know a bit about what James is feeling. So Brad was feeling furious because he thought that James should have known that this was annoying, that his music was annoying him. Now, we don't think this is very fair because actually it's really hard to know what other people are thinking and feeling unless you tell them. So Brad assumed that James should know, but James didn't know. So James was really startled and he was upset when Brad yelled at him. And sometimes if we get a bit startled and shocked, we can get a bit stubborn and we don't want to do what the person is demanding we do. And this is what happened with James. James refused to turn his music down because he was so shocked that Brad had yelled at him. So in our box below, we can see that Brad got up and screamed at James to turn his music down. Lovely, that's it. Then what happened after that? We can see that James actually refused to do what Brad was demanding he did because James was so shocked. After that, do you remember what happened? Brad actually stormed out of the library because he was so angry. He was furious. So before we think about what happened or what could have happened differently, we're going to have a think about what Brad and James were feeling, something called zones of regulation. And this uses colours to help us to identify what we're feeling.
So we can look back at our visual timetable and using a visual planner is finished, and now we're going to be talking about feelings using some of the zones of regulation. So just a recap, there's been a few videos on our School Talk about zones of regulation, so do go back and look at those for a refresher. But we have the blue zone, which is when we're feeling a little bit sick, a little bit tired and bored. That's when we're in the blue zone. We've got the red zone here, which is very much feeling out of control, angry, terrified, feelings like that. And then we've got the yellow zone here, which is feeling a little bit excited, nervous, worried, anxious, a little bit silly. And then we've got here the green zone, which is feeling a little bit more calm and focused. And it's really the zone that we are ready to learn and become in. So thinking about some of the students in the library, including James, what zone do we think that Brad is in? So we know that Brad was furious and he screamed, which makes us think that he was not in control. So I think that Brad was in the red zone. So we can see here that he was in the red zone. So I'm just going to do a little circle around that. Okay. And so we know that Brad was in the red zone. That's clear to us now. But having a think about what might other people feel in this situation. So what might other people be feeling that are in this in the library with Brad? So they might be feeling a little bit anxious. So they might be feeling in the yellow zone. And it's helpful to ask that question, what might other people feel? The next question is, what might other people be thinking? They might be thinking a number of different things. They might be thinking, poor Brad, I hope he's okay. And the last question to ask a young person is, what might other people say in that situation? So it could be something like, I hope he doesn't shout at me. Lots of different other thoughts and things that people might say in that situation. So labelling other people's emotions using the zones of regulation can be a really helpful approach for young people, and it can help it become a lot more concrete to see those visual colours, to know that Brad was in the red zone and actually a lot of people around him were feeling in the yellow zone. It's going to be really helpful to label other people's emotions. So coming back to our visual planner, our last box thinks about what could have happened instead of this situation. So what could have happened instead of shouting at James? So we have three options that we've come up with. So you might want to talk to young people at home about what their options could be for them. So it could be that at this point here, when we know that Brad is already finding it a little bit hard to concentrate. He's got that previous knowledge that James doesn't have to work as hard as him, so he's already feeling a little bit annoyed. He's already feeling in the yellow zone a little bit. So at that point, Brad could have labelled his emotion at that point, and he could have said that he was feeling a little bit frustrated and jealous. And he might have said that to himself. He might have been able to label that in that moment. And then you might think about what strategy or what tool could have Brad done at that moment. So he might have tried a number of different strategies. It could be that breathing was a good one for him. He could have done some breathing, or he could have done some self-talk. So said to himself, it's okay. Lots of people have got different strengths, and I'm really good at something that maybe James isn't so good at. So really just supporting him to be able to regulate his emotions in that moment and be able to come up with some ideas of possible other solutions to kind of support Brad to kind of regulate when he's feeling already quite annoyed and jealous. I wonder if you can think of any other options that what you might have done in this situation, and that can be a nice point to talk to with the young people at home, is having a think about what would you have done if you were Brad. What could have you done differently? And have a think after the session and write it in the box at the end of your visual planner. And then you can keep this visual planner as an example. And if another stressful situation comes up, then why not try sitting down together with the young person in your family and working through what happened to see if there's different thoughts and feelings that came up. Another important thing to have a think about together is how an adult can best support you. So how the adult can best support the young person when something stressful happens. So we know that sometimes adults do something which they think might be helpful, but actually makes the young person a bit more irritated. So maybe this is something else that you could talk together about after the session. So having a think about the things which people can do to help you as a young person, and talking to the young person about also things that they find a little bit annoying. So you'll see that there's other school talk videos which talk about zones of regulation and different tools and strategies. So do have a look back at those for a refresher when discussing this.
Great. So I hope that all was beautifully clear and you've enjoyed our colours and our demonstration. I've got 3 tips that the adults can do just to help facilitate these processes and these situations where things can get a little bit tense and where people can get angry or sad. So first, as we've said, first consider giving the young person time just to calm down, help facilitate them getting back into like a green zone, so a place where they're calm, they're listening, they're okay, they're processing, and they can think through the situation. And sometimes that can be a real key between a situation being resolved versus a situation being ignited into something which is worse. Tip number 2 is think about different perspectives of the situation. So your young person obviously will have a perspective, but also if you're the other person involved, you will have a perspective as well. And if there's somebody else who's been involved, it might be worth trying to find out what they were thinking and feeling as well, whether that's another young person or whether that's another adult. Sometimes in these situations, the more information that you have available, the better and easier it is to process and to make sense out of what's happened. So have a think about what questions can you ask, who can you involve, and what information do you need to find out. And then the last tip is obviously to use a visual planner like something like this just to help work through, because sometimes we find that behaviour happens like it did with Brad. Suddenly he blows up and gets really angry, but unless you know what caused that, it's very hard to know how to treat the situation. So we can see that for Brad, there's probably a bit of anxiety, a bit of worry there about his exams. Was he going to do okay? Is he going to be good enough? Is he going to crumble under the pressure? So actually those feelings of anxiety then fed into that kind of jealousy and then led to that anger. So sometimes it's really helpful just to use a visual planner like this, just track back with your young person and find out what they were feeling and what was going on for them, because sometimes it can surprise us what the root of this problem actually is. So, going back to our timetable, we can tick off that we've talked about our feelings and talked about our zones of regulation. Oops. So that means that we are coming into the finish.
Okay, so we're nearly at the end of our session today, and I hope that you found it useful. You can also put a comment in the chat to let us know how you got on, and if you have any questions that you would like to ask us. Some of the previous videos build on some of the approaches that we've been describing today to learn more about using WH questions and how to use a structure to help explain the situation. Have a look at Kay's video from October. And to find out more about emotional regulation, check out Amber's Zones of Regulation video back in August, which can help to explain some of the colours and what they mean. And also check out Susanna's video, which can give some strategies about how you can help yourself when you're feeling sad or angry. And you can also check out our website by searching for Evelina London SLT. Which Laura is showing here. Yeah.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. We've got lots of different School Talk videos on the Facebook page already, so why not scroll back, have a look and see what else you can find which might be of interest. And then we've got another School Talk video being posted at the same time next week on a different subject. So we hope you'll tune in then, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks for joining us. See you soon. Bye.